Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have our lovely special guest back with us, Kensi Evans. She's just this bright spot in my life. I love her so much. And she's going to be here with me today talking about something you may or may not have heard about called differentiation. And there's several elements of that we'll talk about. But this is going to be, I hate this phrase because it's overused, but it's true. This is going to be game-changing. So I am excited to have her back with us. Thank you, Kensi, for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much, Kendra. I always love coming on and chatting with you. Just feels like we're hanging out.
I know. That's the best part. It's so effortless and you have such wonderful insights. So just before we hop in, is there anything you want to share, or whether about the topic or about yourself, that listeners might want?
I'm just excited about this topic. When you had reached out and you mentioned that we were going to talk about differentiation, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. This is something that I have been working on and trying to implement in my life, specifically within my marriage and as a parent. And I just thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to get to learn more, to talk about maybe what I do understand and gain some more insight into what I can get some more perspective on. And I'm excited. I love this topic.
Oh, I do too. I'm glad that I'm not the only one. I sometimes wonder if I dork out about mental health things, but maybe you could help me for the listeners so they're like, what the heck is differentiation? Do you have like just a simple way in your mind to visualize it, conceptualize like what that is?
Okay, so as you were saying that, the thought that actually came to my mind first was, I feel like they go hand in hand, is this concept of enmeshment versus differentiation. And the thought that came to my mind first was this visual of an enmeshed kind of idea. So a ball of yarn, or think of like several different types of yarn, but they've all become tangled together. That is enmeshment, right? Where you can't find the start and end of one string from another. They just all seem like they're now one ball of yarn, right? So we've got enmeshment there. I think differentiation is the idea of those different yarn strings being neatly coiled up in their own little individual packet. So you've got like the brown packet, you've got the pink packet, you've got the red packet, and they're all on their own right now. And then there's this idea of like interconnectedness, or what am I, collaboration, is where you can take those separate balls of yarn and weave something intentionally together, right? That's the interconnectedness that we're going for, not the tangled ball of enmeshed yarn. But we have to know who we are individually first, right? And that's, I think, for me, has been really helpful. Understanding differentiation is like individuals knowing who they are separate from other people. So that's just like my basic understanding of it.
It's funny because I think of it as a ball too, but a different ball. But I do like your yarn thing because it reminds me of my Christmas sweaters. So we're going to go with the Christmas theme here. And I'm going to think of a ball of Christmas lights, and it's all tangled up. And so it's not even just Bowen's family systems theory. So it's just like where it's all tangled up and one of those lights starts flickering and it affects the entire string of lights. And it's this big jumbled mess where it's, say, because it's all about families, right? So say if you, Kensi, and your family are like really stressed and overwhelmed, that's going to affect how your husband responds. And then your kids will react to how you guys are responding. So that's why we see if somebody is struggling with maintaining that differentiation, or maybe they're stuck in that enmeshment, they're very much affecting everyone else in their family because they're not separate. Like instead, when we're healthier, it can be like, oh yeah, mom's stressed and that's okay. Like I can.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with me. It's her thing, right? Yeah.
And that's very hard for children to do, especially unless they've seen it modeled. And as I've been studying this more and more, because it really resonates with me, I'm like, okay, let's do some real self-reflection here, because I feel like there's definitely some parts of this that happen in every family because it's generational. And we can talk about that in a minute too. But I know that there's parts of it that happen in every family, mine included. Like, are they able to differentiate enough? and let go when I'm really stressed, or are they trying to manage my feelings?
And I think another part of it too is not just on them, but do we put the management of our feelings onto our children or others? And that, I think, has been the thing that I have been working through, is recognizing what my role is. Because the other part of it is that our behavior and how we show up, being stressed and feeling stressed and having anger and things like that is fine. But then taking it out on the people around you, not. And so I think a lot of times as the adults, it's I'm stressed, I've got all this stuff and I'm like exploding on everyone. Well, yeah, of course, people are going to feel some sense of ownership when we're doing that because we're putting it out on other people. And so I think like a huge part for me has been recognizing first my own personal emotions. Is this my anger, or is this in response to Brett's stress and him taking things out? Am I feeling stressed because of someone else's directed emotions at me? Or is this like originating with me? And if it's originating with me, then it is important for me to acknowledge the impact that I have on other people, right? And because we are relational. I love your string of lights analogy because, yeah, we do impact each other. But again, it is our responsibility as individuals to take ownership and manage our own emotional experiences. And again, where we are the parents, we are responsible for helping teach children that. But if we don't know how to identify it in ourselves, then how are we going to teach our children? And so I feel like that's been like a huge work for me, is learning my own emotions, first of all, and where they originate, right? Is it my stress, or am I feeling stressed because my significant other is stressed because my children are frustrated with me? And then if it's originating in me, I'm feeling anger because of this, or I'm feeling stress because of this, then what is in my toolbox to help me manage that? Do I need to go on a walk? Do I need to listen to some music? Do I need to do some yoga? Do I need a little bit of a break? What is it on my toolbox? If it originates outside of me, so I'm feeling stressed in response to my husband being frustrated about chores not being done or whatever, what then do I do? Is it my responsibility to take on his stress, or is it not? And in some cases, I'm like, okay, it's not my responsibility to take on his stress. And in some ways, I think that my husband and I have talked about, it actually is our responsibility to point out when we're taking our emotions out on our children. So, hey, I recognize that you're feeling stressed right now, and maybe you just need to take a little bit of a breather. I'll take care of this. Can I step in, or do I need to just take a step back because I'm unable to regulate myself in response to my husband's emotions? So I am not good at this at all. It's so challenging, but I think we talked about this last time. I think awareness is such a huge part to developing any skill. And so just being able to recognize like our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings separate from other individuals, and then like our relational impact on one another, I think is a good starting point with differentiation.
Absolutely. I love several of the points that you made with that. And the personal example too, just talking about you and your family life, like how that shows up. I think it's so easy to just zone out when it's a bunch of information thrown at us, but when it's like a personal experience, like I see this the most with clients and myself, especially, I don't know, probably the first 10 years of marriage. We're about 20 years in. So like we totally know what we're doing now.
Experts.
Okay, maybe that's a lot. But
Newlyweds forever.
no, I feel like I saw that so much in the beginning. And even now, it's definitely there. But we are both doing a lot more of our own work, creating more of that awareness, like you talked about. But in the beginning, it's like when he got angry, that's something that can be really triggering to me. And I start to feel insecure and I start to question myself. And then I get quiet. And then the kids notice me getting quiet. And then they're like tiptoeing around a bit. Dad's angry, mom's quiet. What's going on? Just like everybody's feeling anxious. And that is very much struggling with that enmeshment, like not being able to be individual and let go of what other people are feeling and recognizing, hey, they don't use this language and this theory exactly, but I look at it as it goes back to ownership, that what's my side of the street, what's their side of the street, and being able to communicate that in families. I won't put you on the spot in the moment, but can think of another example like that. But the first thing that came to mind is, yeah, when my husband was angry, the first part of our marriage was very triggering to me. And I would constantly like blur those lines. Can you think of an example?
I actually really love sharing personal experiences because I feel like it's an opportunity for me to work through things again because I'm still trying to figure this out. Something I really tried to create space for in my family with my children is I want them to be able to call me out if I'm being inconsistent or if I am taking my emotions out on them. What was it that I said the other day? I don't know. I was feeling stressed and it wasn't even fair to my kids because I think I was working on some things and I was feeling the pressure and expectation of deadlines. And so I finished that. I go out of my room and my boys are actually playing happily and they're having a great time. But I'm like, they haven't done their responsibilities. They're like half-dressed heathens. What are they doing instead of recognizing, okay, I just came from this busy, chaotic space in my mind and I'm coming out to chaos that is completely normal and understandable. And I'm wanting to control it, right? So I come out and I'm like, guys, what are you doing? Have you had breakfast? I'm like listing off all of their responsibilities and I'm doing it in a snappy voice. My oldest son was like, Mom, have you had breakfast? You're not you when you're hungry. Yeah, you know the Snickers commercial? Oh my gosh, the Snickers commercial. I showed my boys because I'm like the basic needs, like, have you had enough sleep? Did you eat? Are you thirsty? Like those things to check in with yourself. And one time I was like, have you eaten? You're not you when you're hungry because it's a Snickers commercial. So my oldest at the perfect time. And I was just super impressed with him because it was witty and funny. And he still called me out. And they have called me out more directly. Like, Mom, you're being mean. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, that hurts. But you're totally right. I'm not being fair. I'm not listening to you guys. I'm just going off on a rant. And like, they've called me out. And that one, it was just like, oh, like just that kind of. And I was like, you know what? I haven't had breakfast. I am angry. Like I am not me when I'm hungry. So made myself a smoothie. We all calmed down. And I think in the past, it would have been like, how dare he disrespect me like that? Making it all about me, right? That idea of enmeshment where it's like, no, we're not going to distract from the real issue here, which is that you haven't done your responsibilities, right? Instead of taking personal ownership in a different situation, if I was more calm, if I was in a more playful mood, I would have handled that differently, right? And the enmeshment idea is, no, you guys are in on this too. And what I'm feeling, you guys need to help me figure out because obviously it's what you guys are doing, right? So there's one. I'm sure it could come up.
Do you mind if I share another one that really?
Sure. Yes.
It's always about parenting. No, I have plenty with marriage too. But this one is my youngest daughter, and it still makes me sad, but hopefully people can relate to it and recognize we're all human. But I noticed my side of the street is I'm juggling a lot of balls. I love to be involved in a lot of things. And that's me. Like I choose to put that on myself and even indirectly or directly on my family. And I had been very clear in my communication with my daughter. I was like, are you sure? Because she has these sensory things. Are you sure you want to keep this clothing item? Because I am going on a trip for 10 days. I am not going to have time to return it later. I have to do it now. And she's, no, I'm definitely going to wear it. And I was like, okay, because I'm going right now to the store. This is my last chance. So I returned the item. I came back home a different item. The next morning, not even 12 hours later, she was like, actually, I don't want it. And yes, that's normal as parents to be frustrated by that. There's space for that. And I didn't respond it very well. I really wanted frost it with some guilt, some shame, really serve it on that big old fat cake for her. Like, how dare you when I have such limited time? And it worked. She felt very sad and guilty and full of shame. I wasn't yelling at her, but I was like, really? Like, I just don't have time for this. And then I thought about it. I was like, oh, that just doesn't feel good. Maybe this isn't the best way to say it either, but I know better. I know what I'm doing here. That's not the best way to handle it. So I thought about it for a little while, gave space for that. And then I didn't say it in this language, but you know what? I still need to go back but as we're talking about this, I recognize there's that my side of the street is very much not over scheduling where I don't have space for that. When people are human, that just can't be chalked up to something that happens to all of us. And to have a discussion, hey, this is why it was difficult for me. And I did do that. I don't have a lot of time. I'm going on that trip. I did ask you in the future, could you please keep that in mind? And I did say this. And there's space for you to be human. There's space for all of us to be human. And so I own my part and I communicated that. If I were to do it all over again, I would try not to serve her that frosted cake of shame. And
you know, though, Kendra, I think that is a huge part of differentiation is we are human. We aren't perfect. We're not going to do this perfectly. We are relational. And so like that idea of enmeshed is this messy ball of yarn and we don't know one from the other. And then we've got our individual balls of our yarn. Ultimately, we want to use those individual balls of yarn to make something beautiful. And sometimes we have to undo some stitches, right? Sometimes it's, oh, that's the repair process. And I think that is a huge part of differentiation, even if it is after the fact. Having that self-awareness to see it and then be like, okay, I'm going to go back and clearly state to my daughter what was not okay about my behavior so that she knows that her being human isn't an issue, and then communicate in the way that I actually do want to communicate. That is huge, right? That is a part of differentiation. That is teaching your children. You are modeling that. And I love that you shared that story because I think that's the reality is it can show up in so many different ways. This enmeshed concept of it doesn't have to be like us yelling and freaking out. It doesn't have to be loud, right? It can also be on the side of, oh, I'm super sad. Why aren't you sad with me? Or, oh, this is frustrating to me. You should feel bad about it, right? Like it shows up in so many ways. And so that was a perfect example of you being like, wait a minute. Like she wasn't intentionally trying to bother me or make my life difficult. She is a child. And so allowing space for that and allowing space for yourself, because it is hard. It is busy. We are figuring this out forever. Forever you're learning.
Kensi, are you trying to tell me that I need to make space for being human as well as a mother?
Not too much space. You better be pretty perfect and perfectly differentiated and perfectly regulated all the time.
That's a tall order. So my question for you now, Kensi, is how do you think we can do this? Or maybe how do you do this? Like, how can we create more differentiation? And we didn't even talk about triangulation yet, too. Let's see if we can talk about that as well. But families are probably like, okay, those are like great examples, but like, what now? What do we do? How do we get out of this trap when it's like sometimes so subtle?
I think the first step is that self-introspection and self-awareness. And it takes a lot of sitting with uncomfortable emotions. So when you feel guilt after you overreacted, sit with that.
Yeah.
And look at that instead of justifying it. Go into why you felt bad about it, right? So if you overreact with someone, allow yourself to feel just that uncomfortable feeling of what it's trying to tell you and don't make it about the other person. So I think that's the first part of self-identifying. And then when I have that discussion with my children about how I did it wrong, I tell them, you know what, it's probably really scary for you to call me out because of how I have acted. But I want you to know, I want you to call me out. And if it's not in the moment, I want you to tell me about it after. If you feel like I'm being mean, I want you to tell me because that's important to me. How I impact you matters to me. And I want you to feel safe enough to tell me. And then that way they don't have to show up in the way that I want them to. They can tell me hard truths. I think you're being mean and unfair. But that's their own individual perspective. So I think that's where I've started.
I love that you said that too. And that's so different generationally. If you try to do this to grandparents, not going to go over well, probably, because it's so much about respect and so much about, you even spoke to that a little bit. But besides this generation and below, that's a big struggle. Recognize that you might have to teach your kids that too. We're going to work with grandma and grandpa. But we know in this family culture, we are open to doing those things. And that's a perfect example of what you can do is like calling you out and maybe even saying, sometimes I might not be quite ready to hear it. Maybe I'm like a little too worked up still. That's okay. That's mom's side of the street. But just know, like, I'll probably come back to you later, or maybe wait a couple minutes. You could teach them maybe both things.
And I like giving them the permission too. Again, I think differentiation is not about making other people comfortable. So if an older generation does something harmful to a child, I definitely want to give them permission to call them out. It's not about my children making them comfortable. They are adults, and the adults should be able to manage themselves, not the children managing them.
That's a good point. And that's something that I hadn't exactly thought of. Like, I'm thinking of, without sharing too much here, there's an example when a family member was pretty forceful about my child saying a prayer. No, like, you listen to your elders, they do it, and he's no thanks. And they're like, no, that's just what you do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just not how we do it in our family culture. And this was in their home, so a different thing we ended up processing later. But yeah, depending on that setting, there's still a respecting of other people's lens, worldview that they're looking through, and preparing them for, different people see things in different ways. And how do we manage that? But yeah,
that is really tricky to manage. But again, I would just say that is on the adult to manage. I get having a desire for someone to say a prayer and like the respect element of that. But I guess like for me, I have been really looking into what is respect, and it's mutual, right? Like it's reciprocal. It goes both ways. So the idea of expecting a child to respect an elder or someone else because it's their home or whatever, but the respect isn't going the other way is just really inconsistent. And I think that goes, speaking, since this is a religious frame that we're talking about, I think that kind of goes against what God has taught us about loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And it didn't sound like your son was disrespectful. No, thank you.
No, that was an interesting one because I wasn't there for that. And so talking about it, breaking it down afterwards. Okay, this might happen in other situations. How do we navigate that? What are we going to do about it in our home or other people's home? That's a complicated one to teach because just having exchange students, so many people have different worldviews. And how do we show up? Not that we're like a chameleon and changing ourselves, but still being respectful of where everyone's at, like generational differences, all of these things, still having that sense of self and standing up. I love what you're saying and speaking to. It's just a different dynamic, but I almost feel like that is a whole nother episode.
Okay, triangulation.
Yeah, let's go with triangulation. So do you want to talk about what it is or you want me to?
No, yeah, I would love to hear what your thoughts are, because I think I can see several examples in my life, and especially in my like family of origin life. But yeah, I'd love to see if what I think aligns with what you know.
Oh, absolutely. I guess simply is probably just an example. So say like a mom is complaining about her husband's behavior to another child. So say that I do that with my oldest daughter. Oh, your dad is just always late to everything, and just like venting to her. And so what I'm doing is I'm pulling her into that conflict that I have with my husband. And that creates tension in all of the relationships. Like I'm trying to get somebody on my team in a sense, but then it's alienating her potentially from her dad, but also causing tension between me and my spouse. Like we do that all the time.
There's the triangle.
Absolutely. We do it all the time, but we don't necessarily recognize it. And I was recently listening to this book, Everything Isn't Terrible, where it talks about all these concepts. Super good book. You know how you vent, or maybe you're just processing or whatever you want to call it, to a sibling. Often it's like the family of origins. I have recognized how often I'm doing it. Oh yeah, we're just like talking about these family dynamics, but are we really, or are we actually creating that triangle that prevents us from going straight to that person and having those healthier relationships? I'm totally guilty of that. I do that sometimes. I don't know. Are you human too, Kenzie, or?
Before you even said anything. It's like, yeah, no, I think it's a process. The most humbling part, I think, of understanding and seeing triangulation is beginning to see it in your behavior. And I think if we are willing to open our minds to the ways that we do it, we begin to see it more. And that enables us to begin to be able to address it. And the thing that's great about triangulation is that cut out one of those like unhealthy modes of communication and the triangle is ruptured, right? It's in that way, what I have really appreciated about the idea of fixing triangulation is not engaging in it, right? If you remove yourself, then there's no longer three pieces for the triangle, right? Yeah. No, I think, and it's hard. Definitely still have that. Just a quick example, but I notice like with my children unintentionally doing it, as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got so many examples. Like we'll be driving home in the car, and this was just last night. I was like, son, will you help other son with this thing? And he was like, no. And I was like, excuse me? That's not okay. And then at that moment, because of my reaction to his response, it was like, hey, you never helped mom. You're not being helpful. Da, 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 da. And as you were talking, I was like, yeah, that's a form of triangulation, right? This idea. And afterwards, I did try to be like, no, that's not how it is. But in the way that I responded, it's like, oh, let's team up here and be against this guy here. And so just recognizing it, and I think giving ourselves the space to see it at least helps us to make repair. I think repair is the greatest gift that we can do in any of these concepts because we're not going to be perfect. That's not the expectation. But making repair, I think, is doable.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. And we can both attest. We see it all over the place. It's so easy to point it out in others, but to recognize, wait, when am I involving a third person? Maybe that's even a professional, maybe that's a mentor, whatever that is. But instead of going directly to that person, now there can be space for a therapist or something where you are trying to process it and build up that maybe role play how you're going to do that. But mostly, let's be honest, mostly we are doing that to justify our hurt feelings or to get like a cheerleader, or sometimes we're just gossiping. Whatever it is, when we're not going directly to that person, it just shows it's a sign of enmeshment, and it is preventing us from having healthier functioning in our relationships. As we wrap this up, I have about 5 just very brief, basic tips that if I were to give parents on what they could do in simple ways to practice creating greater differentiation. If you have any just even informal thoughts, that'd be great, Kenzie. But do you mind if we end with that today? And if you have any final thoughts with that too?
Yeah, no.
Okay, I'll say mine and give you a little bit of time to come up with some. But my first one is get to know yourselves. Kenzie, you spoke to this a lot, like creating that space. So just take time to recognize like maybe when you get annoyed or why, and the little quirks and things that are challenging and how you can own your side of the street. And then keep it to one-on-one, what we just talked about with a triangulation. Go directly to that person. It is so much harder than we think it will be, but that's going to be where our best self shows up. And then a simple way to remember it is maybe spot the family reruns. We didn't get into this a lot, but this is a generational thing. This is very much a repeated pattern that keeps going on and on. So maybe there's like a greatest hits thing in your family. When things get tense and those triggering topics, just notice those reruns and then spot those patterns as something that you can change to get out of that cycle of enmeshment and differentiate to become your own self. This is my 4th one. Be your own emotional DJ. So what that means is learn to calm yourself down rather than relying on somebody else. We often have a best friend, a sibling, a spouse that manage my feelings. I feel really uncomfortable. And we didn't get into this a lot, but learn to soothe yourself, because that's a form of differentiation too. If we're always relying on other people, I do this to my kids a lot. Oh, I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. It's not their job to calm me down. That's on me. And then the last one is give people space to be themselves. We often want our kids to be like these perfect little angels and all these things, but just how you talked about, Kensi, how you let them call you out and do these different things, like allowing them to be their own little humans with different opinions and thoughts and not letting it trigger and react us, or maybe it will, and that's okay, like having space for that as well. But focus on our own reactions and to those things and let them be themselves. I see this all the time with my clients. Like there's major struggles with enmeshment between a couple. So really practicing letting go. And one way we can do that is having me time and having your own friends, your own interests outside of your spouse. That is so healthy.
I think your points are spot on, Kendra. I do think that when we're first developing a skill, it can be really challenging to see the things that we don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. And I do think that a trusted therapist that's removed from the situation, who doesn't really have a vested interest besides your success, can be really helpful. And for me, I did have some trusted friends that were also removed enough from the situation where they weren't like a part of the enmeshment, a part of the dynamic that helped call me out. So finding people that aren't just going to increase your bias, right? But rather call you out on inconsistent behaviors, I actually think is very helpful, because we cannot be the answer for ourselves a lot of times, because we are in our story. We are in our perspective. We are stuck in it. And so I think at least gaining the awareness enough to know, like you were saying, Kendra, don't rely wholly on other people to help regulate you. I also have had enough awareness to realize we are relational beings, and there have been studies done that show that a regulated person coming to a dysregulated person can be one of the fastest modes to help calm a nervous system. But recognizing which people you should do that with, right? Going to your child when you're dysregulated about your spouse is creating triangulation. Going to a friend outside of this family dynamic is a much better choice than someone who is within that system. So just recognizing, okay, I do need someone, I do need an external perspective, I do need a human, but knowing which direction to go, right? So that you don't create that triangulation, I think is important. So those are the thoughts that I would have, because self-awareness is important, but you can only get so far on your own because our brain doesn't want to see those uncomfortable truths sometimes. So those are my thoughts.
I love how you can build on something or maybe take it from a different angle. I think that's a benefit of having you here, which I love. Yeah, it is. I said mentor, but you're right. Like it is something that someone can be removed enough. Ask yourself the question, is it somebody that is going to, just like you set up with your kids? And it sounds like you're surrounding yourself with people that are willing to call you out and be honest. And if it can't be one of those people, then it's not the right person. If it's just somebody that's keeping you and with your blinders on and feeding you that justifying behaviors and causing you to be stuck in that stagnancy, and you're not perpetuating those patterns, that blindness. Oh, and there's so many of them out there. They're all around wanting to feed us those little lies. It feels good in the moment, but it's going to keep us stuck. So I'm so glad you spoke to that. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that. So many wonderful points that you made. So thank you, Kensi, so much for coming on and giving us your advice and your wisdom and maybe seeing it from that different angle. I very much appreciate it. And I know
I appreciate you. You're amazing. I love the different analogies that you came up with. I think differentiation is such a complex topic. And so I was so excited to hear. What was that book that you said? I want to look into it.
Everything Isn't Terrible.
Perfect.
I'll
go look that up.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I want to get so much more training on this. Bowen's family systems theory, phenomenal. Just like how the family unit is, it's all so connected. And if you really want to heal, you work on your family of origin and your family, your kids. That's where major things are going to change. And those patterns are going to shift into healing. But I'll leave it at that, and we'll make it for a little bit of a sneak peek for whatever is to come, the next step we talk about this, because there's so much. Thank you again. And of course, we'll have you back to talk about the next big thing. So I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, I'm excited. That'll be great.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you, no matter what your house or your hair looks like. I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.